Okay guys, in today's video we're going to be taking another look at BTC. Bitcoin has had another surge to the upside and this could be really good news for next week. So we're going to get into the technical analysis on Bitcoin and give you the scoop as to what is going on with both the long-term view and of course the short-term price expectations. Guys, as we get into this video, if you do find it useful and informative, hit that like button. I really do appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you've subscribed, hit the bell, tapped on all, and you won't miss another Bitcoin update. Guys, with that said, done and out of the way, let's jump into the Bitcoin charts here and see exactly what's been going on with BTC. So as you can see, this is the weekly chart for Bitcoin. We are looking at the USDT, so it's paired with USDT, and we are on the Binance exchange. Now, there's a few things about this weekly chart that I really want to kind of cover off to start with. Really good to understand the big long-term macro piece before we jump into the daily and the hourly views. Now, on this weekly chart, we can obviously see Elliott theory, the 5 impulse waves to the upside. And what you can see here is actually we started things off at the previous end of the bull run, right? So December of 2018. This is basically where Bitcoin really reached its low point. And this actually started the first wave, okay? So this first wave for Bitcoin kind of peaked up here in June of 2019. We then started this downward trend within our macro view here, and the second wave actually ended during the crash of March 2020. Okay, and this is a key point for us because a lot of the altcoins also started at this particular point with their 5 Elliott waves to the upside. So obviously this was your low, and then we started to see us rise up towards the all-time highs that we've enjoyed during 2021. And there's a few things on that journey, right? From between wave 2 and wave 3. Ultimately, this entire journey, which took 1 year, just over 1 year to complete, we actually started to see some interesting stuff within the stochastic relative strength index. And this is what's down here at the bottom. Okay, the stochastic. And ultimately what you saw here was basically at the point of the low of 2018 bull run, we actually saw us come down to basically 1.3 on the stochastic relative strength index. Anything lower than 20 is oversold. So we were incredibly oversold at that point in time. We obviously rose right the way up to 100, so basically overbought. And then during the crash of March 2020, we saw this actually come down all the way down to 7.9 during this particular peak area here. Then obviously starting on this journey to the upside, we saw us go into the overbought area pretty quickly, small pullback in the middle, and then we went up again here. And then we saw this correction right in the middle of this wave 3, where that momentum completely dropped out of Bitcoin, right? We basically took it from overbought to oversold very, very quickly without damaging any price whatsoever. And I think this was courtesy of the manipulation in the Wyckoff distribution on the charts. And ultimately what you saw here was then the ability to then take advantage of that situation and continue the price rally for Bitcoin. It really went on a tear here and took over these really high areas. And obviously we set the all-time high at this point, right? The other thing that's really interesting is actually we set the all-time high as we were approaching the oversold area, as the stochastic relative strength index was dropping back down once again. So again, the expectations being down here, like we saw previously in these areas, is to basically start to rise this stochastic relative strength index back to the upside as we go after this 5th wave to the upside here. Okay, but what's really interesting is you were able to see that manipulation. In theory, it kind of should have stopped it around here, the price expectation around that kind of 42 area. But obviously had a pullback, right? But on the stochastic, small pullback here in terms of Bitcoin's price, and then continued this rally to the upside. But obviously this rally to the upside here was not really due to any momentum within that stochastic. So it's interesting. And obviously as we started to come down here, we find these new low areas. We basically take that stochastic relative strength index even lower, all the way down to 0.12, which is incredibly oversold for Bitcoin, right? So it's undervalued. This is something you also see with the stock to flow model and the deflections, right? Because what you see there is basically the value of Bitcoin and what the value of Bitcoin should be, and it is significantly undervalued. Now we're actually starting to see some decent corrective action after this 4th wave, and we found that bottom area here. Now, obviously, we can't call it a bottom yet, but we're incredibly close, and things are stacking up very, very nicely for Bitcoin at the moment to actually breach that 42K area. And if we can breach 42K, back test on that 42K resistance level and turn it into a support line, we should be having a very, very strong week next week. So obviously, taking a look at the oversold situation that we're currently in, we're actually at 21.2, so just out of this oversold area on the fast line at 9.5 on the slow line. Ultimately, that stochastic relative strength index is indicating that we are finally having a pretty decent push to the upside, which is also reflected in terms of the price. Now, obviously, all this is fantastic news on the weekly chart, and this is really aligns to the stock to flow model, the Bitcoin dominance models, and all these other things that we've been talking about for months now. But this is a really good indication of what we are aiming to expect during Q3, Q4 of 2021. And the Fibonacci retracement tool on here is indicating that Bitcoin should be targeting about $182,000. So again, that's in line with the stock to flow model, and again, our expectations of what's likely to happen with Bitcoin dominance as well versus these altcoins. So this weekly chart gives us a really good view on what our expectations are as we kind of close off the end of the year. Now, obviously, it's not going to happen fast, and it's not going to be something that you're going to instantly see a candle shoot all the way up to over 100K. It is going to have a bit of a mixed emotions. We're going to have that price move up, and then we are going to have pullbacks. And obviously, people will be buying and selling and trading along each of these particular opportunities. That being said, it is definitely not what a lot of people are talking about being a bear market. In fact, we are a bull market, and what we've had is a corrective wave within this, right? And when we look at it from a weekly point of view, it's really clear to see. And it's always important that you do zoom out if you're ever in doubt. Now, obviously, we've spoken about this weekly view, and it's always good to understand where we are going and where we have been. And it's really easy to see this on that weekly or monthly view. We're now going to jump down into our daily view. And this is an interesting one because this is where you can really see a lot of that manipulation kind of going on, or what was going on. So up here we had the Wyckoff distribution. Now down here we obviously have, or at least started off with the Wyckoff accumulation. That kind of got violated over here, right? We should have actually gone up to these levels that we're at now much earlier if we were following this pattern. Instead, we pulled back, which was unexpected. And what you saw here was basically Bitcoin dropped below 30K. A load of retail investors then shorted Bitcoin, thinking that Bitcoin was likely to go down to 20K. You remember that FUD and that narrative about Bitcoin going down to 10, 15, or 20K. Those scenarios were not really possible because, again, as we mentioned, the stochastic relative strength index is indicating that we are oversold. And exactly at that point of dropping below 30K, it was indicating 0.12, as in there was nowhere else to go. Once you reach zero, you've reached the bottom, right? Now, obviously, you can go down and you can kind of sideways trade at those levels, but instead what you saw here was the institutions, after seeing so many people shorting Bitcoin, take the price back to the upside. And that obviously then meant that loads of people who were shorting Bitcoin, particularly retail investors, were absolutely wrecked and were liquidated. And as a result, all that money flows into those institutions. Now, obviously, we've had a pretty significant run to the upside here, so much so that this daily chart, and you can tell what's been going on, right? Because what you can see here is this is an overbought situation for the stochastic relative strength index. But don't stop the video there, guys, because this is an anomaly when we actually compare this to many of the other time frames. This daily view is something that is a little bit of an oddity in itself. This daily view in itself being overbought is not aligned to that weekly where it says it was oversold, or even the hourly where it is also oversold. So we know the price expectation for Bitcoin right now is to actually continue a run to the upside, and we're going to have a sustained overbought area here on that stochastic relative strength index on our daily. And it's not until our daily and our hourlies are aligned are we likely to see any significant pullbacks. So we're monitoring this situation. We are due a pullback. We can see this within the stochastic, but it isn't coming anytime soon, at least not according to the technicals. So again, this is pretty good and strong news for Bitcoin, because it does mean that we are more than likely going to breach 42K tomorrow, if not beforehand. And when this happens, we should then actually go back testing on that 42K area, and that will be the really strong signal to go into next week if we get this weekly closed candle above 42K. Obviously, there are going to be a little bears that will want to kind of hold this resistance line and prevent Bitcoin from going any higher. That being said, though, this is the next major, this is pretty much the last major area that we need to breach before we can really go ahead and go up to some of those higher area prices. Obviously, when we start looking at the next kind of resistance lines, we are talking about going up to 48K or so. So 42K is absolutely critical. And again, it takes out all of these areas here that we've been trying to trading inside for a very significant portion of time. So breaching this area is absolutely critical. Now, this daily chart in isolation does indicate to us it is very unlikely to actually go ahead and do this, but we can't look at the daily in isolation anymore. Instead, we have to go down into that hourly view now. the hourly view actually shows us that we are completely oversold, which means in the next few hours, we are going to be pushing the price of Bitcoin back up again. Currently on the resistance line right now at 41K, chances are that we're going to power past 42K with a back test once we go into an oversold situation or an overbought situation. So my expectations, guys, let me just grab my arrow here and I'll give you my thoughts on this. I think ultimately we're going to push up here. We might go up to about 43. We might come then back down into our area here, right? Let me just delete that and get my arrow again. But then we're probably going to back test on this 42K area. And that's where we'll then go ahead and surge in next week. It's going to be absolutely critical that we do get a solid closed candle above 42K if we want Bitcoin to continue a nice, strong, steady motion next week. And it's going to be a very strong signal, and it's one that the bears are not going to be able to ignore. The bulls will have control at that point, and it's going to be a fantastic rally for Bitcoin. Now, obviously, there are going to be some resistance lines on this journey. It's not going to be straight lines as my arrows indicate. This is a representation of what my expectations are. Breach 42K, back test it as support, and then push on up ahead. Now, I do imagine that we'll end up with scenarios where we will end up trading sideways like this whilst we have stability and corrective action put in place. And this is what you've been seeing with Bitcoin. We've been seeing basically a nice strong rally to the upside like this, basically going in from an oversold area to an overbought area, having a small kind of correction here that takes us back down into an oversold, and then we have another strong push to the upside. So Bitcoin's looking very, very attractive, and it looks like a pretty strong proposition right now. The other thing that's also worth noting is how basically the artificial intelligence at the advice.io platform is indicating that Bitcoin's basically on a pretty good run. We can see here that the overall rating has actually moved up from B2 to B1, and this is based on all of that technical data being summarized. We can see the fear and greed index is actually now up there as an A3, which is indicating greed, and not extreme greed, but definitely greed. We have good, strong corrective action on our Sharpe ratio now as well, right? Now indicating B2, well above the 50-day average, which is really good and strong motion here for Bitcoin. It wasn't too long ago that there was some serious worry around the Sharpe ratio and BTC, and indicating that there was risk to your rewards. Right now, the Sharpe ratio is actually in a pretty good, strong position at a B2 rating, and I think this is going to continue to grow. We can also see that the moving averages are up at A2 rating, so you can see that the average and the moving averages, as again, with a lot of people talking about EMAs and things like that on the charts, is indicated here within the advice dashboard as well. So really good, strong movement on those moving averages. The peak end value demand, C2, not too bad, but has been better. And I think that in time, that's going to also get very, very well corrected. We can see the profitability is up there at an A1 rating, the best it can be. And again, I think this is going to continue for the long term as well. And it's finally good to see that the AMI-HAD ratio, the liquidity for Bitcoin, has also had corrective action and is now up at a B2 rating. Together, all of these metrics put together actually does get a pretty strong, solid B1 rating here for Bitcoin. I don't think it's going to be too much further before we actually see Bitcoin going back into the A-rated platforms. So I think that ultimately this is a good platform. If you want to be checking out the ratings on Bitcoin, do sign up to advice. We obviously have partnered with them, and the platform here and the artificial intelligence has been right on so many occasions. I do truly trust it. So do check that one out. Now, also, when we have a look at our charts, we obviously have a good understanding of how our weekly view is forming. We obviously know the expectations of 182K is the most likely scenario according to the technicals that we have. We obviously know that the anomaly of all of the charts that we've looked at is our daily view, right? It is the only one that is an overbought situation, whereas our weekly and our hourly are indicating an oversold situation. So the expectations on the short term are that Bitcoin is going to push up and then back test on 42K. That's a pretty strong feeling that I have here for Bitcoin. I think that also aligns quite nicely to what advice and that artificial intelligence is telling us. The only thing that we have to obviously acknowledge is that the daily view is in requirement of a correction at some point. And what I would like to see is Bitcoin reach a pretty decent level before that correction, the corrective action actually comes in. So we are mindful that Bitcoin is overbought on that daily, but right now there's nothing indicating that we should be worried immediately about any short-term pullbacks. And again, with that weekly view, we obviously have that understanding that ultimately, no matter what happens on our hourly or our daily, in the next few weeks and months, we are expecting Bitcoin to reach over $100,000. These are pretty given considering all of the metrics that we take a look at. And again, we've been pretty confident on this channel, pretty much even from when Bitcoin first had its correction, to say that we are in a bull cycle, not a bear market, and all we are seeing is a corrective wave. And I think hopefully, guys, you aligned to my thinking on this. As I try to explain all of the metrics that we use here and to kind of justify my thinking. But ultimately, everything on this chart looks pretty good for Bitcoin to go and have a pretty good second half of the year, closing Q3 in a really strong way, and of course getting its all-time high well above $100,000 in Q4 of this year. Timing is the hardest thing to gauge, but historically speaking, December has been the best month for Bitcoin. Guys, if you have found this video useful and informative, then do go ahead and hit that like button. I really do appreciate it. If you're new, make sure you've subscribed, hit the bell, tapped on all, and you'll never miss another Bitcoin update. Guys, with this said, done, and out of the way, I hope you all have a fantastic day, and I'll catch you all in the next one.